On the issue of the great divorce, increasingly, particularly those who spend their time watching TV news and are on social media, they feel more divided than ever. But I gotta be honest with you, it is a sentiment that is not felt by the people furthest removed from being online. It is a phenomenon almost unique to those who spend their time on social media and watching television news, particularly Fox and MSNBC and the other very partisan newscasts. I don't think we're going to get to the point where we actually do break apart. I don't think we can. Someone the other day, yeah, I forget now who it was it Carol? I can't remember, pointed out that in New York, you had several million people voted for Joe Biden, but also voted for Donald Trump. What if you cede the left to New York largely because of New York City? What do you do with the rest of that state? Do red states get it? Because the state is remarkably red, except in the New York City area. And they're just so dominant population-wise, they offset the rest of the state. If you think it is inevitable, you sometimes will take inevitable actions to make it happen. But I don't know that we're going to, and I have thoughts. I actually have some thoughts on what should or should not happen. I don't think the United States of America should break apart. There are days where I think it should. I'll be honest with you. There are some days I think, you know what, let's go on and have a divorce. But really, I don't think so. One, I don't think it's practical. As a buddy of mine, there's actually an email discussion I'm a part of right now going on. I will read you from a friend of mine who I know will listen to the show. I will not attribute any of this to anyone there, but he's one of the wisest people I know in these things. And he says national divorce isn't happening for a host of reasons, not least of which is impracticality and inevitably bloody process, which would make the first Civil War look like a short and manageable affair. So we should set it aside, except for hypothetical and illustrative purposes, in which roles I think it does a great service. That service is this: a republic requires a functionally Republican citizenry, and our republic does not presently have that. At present, we expect our republic to exist with a combination of Republican citizens plus a critical mass of non-Republican or even anti-Republican citizenry. The critical mass of the latter possesses and is willing to use the mechanisms of violence and the powers of the state, which means, in turn, the republic isn't going to work. And that's true. I can understand that there are those who are ready to break apart the country. But it is neither feasible nor practical. And for all of the people who say, well, the military's on our side and we got all the guns, okay. The other side has the cities and the supply chain. And the cities and the supply chain matter as much, if not more, than the military and the guns. Because you may have parts of the military, you don't have it all, nor do you have all of the major weaponry, much of which is not inside this country right now. But also the ports. You don't have the ports except maybe the port of Jacksonville, the port of Miami, the port of Savannah. You don't have the port of Los Angeles. You don't have the port of New York. You don't have those ports to be able to import goods. In fact, right now, one of the supply chain crises we're having is because of that. But more importantly, you don't have the will of people to do it. What we need in this country is actually a real appreciation for federalism in ways neither side has. There's this bro culture on the right now, national populism, that I think they're calling it right now, where they want to control Washington and impose conservative values on the country because they believe conservatives have conserved nothing and the left has imposed their values on everyone. And really what we should be striving for is a radical federalism where if California wants to have abortion and gay marriage and drag queen story hour, let them. And if Georgia wants to have no abortion and encourage traditional marriage and no drag queens, let them. Georgia will eventually have more kids and breed out California. But the reality is, let California be California, let Georgia be Georgia. Both sides right now, at an activist level, funded by national groups, feel compelled to impose their will on other people in this country, where most people in this country, the overwhelming majority of the people in this country, just want to be left alone. I got to be honest. I think if you live in a city where the majority of the people in the city want to have a drag queen story hour, go do it. I don't have to go, and neither do you. But I also think if you live in a city where a majority of people don't think it's appropriate, the city should be able to say, nope, sorry, we don't do that here. And it should ultimately be at the state level, not the city level, because cities are subservient to the states. But I think that you have to be allowed to live in an area that reflects your morality. I live in Middle Georgia, and Middle Georgia is fairly pro-life. There had been no abortion clinic, and one has started, and there really isn't a lot that can be done to stop it. I think the state of Georgia should be able to pass a law that says you can't have an abortion in Georgia. And if the left wants to start a nonprofit where a woman who wants an abortion can have the costs of travel covered to get to California to have an abortion, let her. And Georgia can't penalize her. And if someone who lives in California is appalled that California is a pro-abortion, godless state, they should be able to pack up and move somewhere else without penalty. That's the way federalism should work. You know, up until the passage of the 14th Amendment, and really even until the 1900s, states had state religions. The federal government, under the First Amendment, was required to be neutral and stay out of it, but states had affiliations. A lot of southern states had Baptist affiliations. Maryland had a strong affiliation with the Catholic Church. Part of our problem here is the 14th Amendment. And my radical point is that in the 21st century, we might want to get rid of the 14th Amendment. It's not going to happen, mind you. But in the world that exists, not the world that some want, this whole idea of we just need to break apart the country sounds good to a faction of people who haven't thought out the real consequences of it and how it would work. It would be a very bloody affair. And conservatives would have the rural parts of the country and a lot of guns. And the left would have the cities and the supply chains. And they would starve out the right. And it would be a bloody, bloody affair. Also, it's totally hypothetical. This country's not going to break apart. You may feel like it, and I need to say something lovingly, gingerly, softly. If you think the country is going to break apart, if you're really concerned that we're headed towards a national divorce because everybody hates each other, go out into your city and make your city a better place. And get offline and turn off the TV. Get out of politics. Get into culture. I gave a speech in Delaware this weekend. Great time. Been Newark, Delaware, local Republican Party. Really, really just wonderful people. Peter, I know you're listening. I would love to come back. It was a lot of fun. We didn't expect to get paid. They gave me a nice little stipend for coming up there. One of the things that I told them is, you know, the prophet Daniel, the book of Daniel, he's reading Jeremiah 29, which is one of my favorite passages of Scripture. Talked about it on this program, where God says you're going to be in exile for 70 years. And this is the word of God through the prophet Jeremiah saying, you know what? Get a house, get married, start a family, grow a garden, live as if you're going to be there. Commit to that location because you're in exile there. And seek the welfare of the city in which you're in exile, and there you'll find your welfare. Pray for it, and there you'll find your welfare. And I think the people who are committed to the idea of a national divorce are the people who need to go find their battered women's shelter, and they need to work there. They need to find their local food bank and go volunteer. They need to go stand in line at the local soup kitchen and serve the homeless. Because they've become so fixated on politics and division, they have lost touch with what's happening in the real world of America, where most people are raising their families and living life and not worried about some sort of divorce coming, not worried about breaking apart the country. You know, people rushed headlong into the Civil War. They didn't think of the consequences. Up until 2011, 2012, the majority of people killed in military conflict in this country were still killed in the Civil War. So many people died in the Civil War. Whole families split up. Is that what you really want? Maybe instead of rushing headlong into it and trying to stake out your stand, you should be working to keep the country together. And how do you keep the country together? Seek the welfare of the city in which you're in exile and pray for it, and there you will find your welfare. And maybe get out of national politics for a little while. Everybody's got to have an opinion on stuff, and everybody has an opinion on this, but I got to tell you, it's not going to work out the way you think it is. It never does. And I don't care which way you think it's going to work. It's not going to work exactly that way. But it's going to be bad for everyone. We can all be sure of that. I would encourage the left and the right, though, to understand that while you're at loggerheads over issues, that Washington should not matter as much as it does to you, and you should be using the 50 states as laboratories of democracy to experiment and see what actually works policy-wise with your ideas. And if you don't like what's happening with your state, move. One of the worst things the Supreme Court has ever done has essentially been to decide that the minority of the minority in a place can control the majority in morals and ethics and what's good and what's not and what can be done. And I think the more we respect each other's differences and say, if you don't like it, go somewhere where you're in the majority, then and only then are we going to get back to a country where we realize Washington does not and should not matter as much as we've made matter it, because the reality is that on a daily basis, your local city council and school board do far more to affect you day in and day out than Washington ever will. But as everyone fixates on Washington and makes it the be-all, end-all of civilization, we're more and more likely to have these conversations about whether or not we should break up the country. And instead of breaking up the country, we should be working in our communities to help the people in need.